Welcome, everybody, to our second episode of the JSS Podcast. As you can tell, we got a little upgrades to our studio here, trying to make it a little more comfortable, trying to make me feel a little bit more in my element, as hard as it is. But, it's just figured we'd share some stuff and share some information and try to just make this a little more, uh, you know, tailored to the user experience a little bit and give you guys information that I think could be useful. Um, Ideally, the purpose of this is to try to help and open some opportunities for people who wanted to invest, wanted to understand real estate, want to understand how they can potentially build some wealth or do some things with their money or their investments and open some doors. Um, we've talked about last week. We talked a little bit about hard money and private loans and some differences and different different products we have. And today I wanted to just mainly get into a little more in depth into our fix and flip product, is what a lot of people call it. It's a product specifically designed to flip properties, right? Obviously, like the name says. So we're going to just kind of dive into the specifics and how it works, what you need to get started, potential pitfalls. We're going to talk about how to execute on it, how to make yourself look good for the lender, and then and obviously how to make sure you're making a good return on your money, because that's obviously what we're trying to do, right? So um, let's just kind of get to the basics of what is a fix and flip loan. A fix and flip loan is a loan that's designed for an investor who is looking to flip a property, and obviously for a profit, right? Um, you can do within the fix and flip market, there is a fix to sell, right? Where you're buying a property, you're fixing it up, and you're going to sell it. But it is also another offshoot of that, of fix to rent, where you're going to fix it and then rent it. There's a method that people talk about called the Burr method, and we'll get into that a little bit later, and kind of share how this product feeds into that to make it work, right? So the basics is this fix and flip loan is a short-term loan. Um, it's intended for when you're buying the property. We're going to finance a certain percentage of your purchase, um, and we are going to finance, for the most part, 100% of your rehab. Meaning, say you're buying a property for 400,000, we're going to finance 80 to 85% of that purchase price. And then if you have a rehab budget, call it a 50,000 for paint, for carpet, for roof, whatever it is that you're going to use to use and to spend in that property, we'll finance that. And what we'll do is we hold that money after the close of escrow, and then we dish that out in tranches or in draws, to be able to execute on your repairs. These loans, like I said, are short term, right? It is anywhere between 6 months, 12-month, or 18-month terms. Again, they're intended for you to buy the property and execute on your flip. So we're not something that you're gonna be holding on to us long term. Because we're expensive, like I said before. There's no doubts about that. But it's a means to an end. It's being able to execute on that transaction, buy your property, make your profit, get out, either to sell it at a profit or to rent it. And we'll get into that renting part of it a little bit after. So step by step, what you're doing, you're gonna identify the property that you want to purchase. Ideally, when you're identifying that property, you're looking for something where you can add value, right? One of the analogies that I always tell people is that when you're making money on these homes, these properties, you're usually making the money on the purchase, right? You're finding a distressed property, you're finding somebody who's upside down, you're finding somebody who's going into foreclosure, a property that's in disrepair, where you can get a good deal, right? And that's the biggest factor is you're going to get a good deal on one of these properties, where you're either buying it from, you're door knocking, or you have a realtor who's out there shopping for you. There's opportunities to buy through wholesalers, and I'll explain a little bit about that, who those people are. Buying it directly from a consumer, if you're buying the lists of people that are in foreclosure or going into notice of default, and there's different services that you can get into to help you identify this information. Um, and it helps you identify these properties, right? But the key is getting a good deal, buying a property that's under market. Talking a little bit about wholesalers, and I know a lot of people are don't understand what a wholesaler is, or either that, or maybe have said, "Oh, I like to be in the wholesale business," and that's a topic for another day. But just real quick, I'll talk about wholesalers are kind of pretty much scouts. These wholesaler guys are out there finding properties, right? And they are identifying, they're doing the legwork to find either a distressed property or property you can get at a bargain or a discounted price. What they do is they negotiate a price with the seller or the owner of the property. Let's just, for simple math, they identify a property and they get it under contract with the seller for $100,000, and they say, "Look, I'm going to buy this property for $100,000." They open escrow, but before they close escrow, they've sold that property to somebody else at a profit, right? So, for example, this wholesaler identifies a property, get it under contract for 100, but they've sold it to you, the flipper or the end user or what have you, for 115 or for 120, right? So they're doing a double closing, and they are, before they close with the seller, you're popping in and you're going to do that transaction and you're going to buy it. And then they keep that spread or that margin, that 10, 15, 20,000 minus fees or whatnot. And so they're not making huge profits per property. These wholesalers sometimes are making five, they're making 10,000. I've seen some making 25, 30,000. But for the most part, it's small amounts that they're making on each property. But really all they're doing is just passing it from the right hand to the left, doing some paperwork and making money. So that's just a quick into wholesaling, and we'll dedicate an episode maybe into how to work with wholesalers, or how to identify wholesalers, or how to be a wholesaler and potentially use this opportunity to make some money for yourself. So once you've identified the property, however it is, it's important to put together, either if you're working with a contractor, or you're working with, or you're going to do the work yourself, to put together a line item budget of what you plan to do to the property, right? 5,000 for flooring, 4,000 for paint, 3,000 for plumbing. So being able to identify what you want to do to the property. The tricky part is doing this where you don't own the property yet, right? You've identified it, you see there's an opportunity, but being able to come up with a budget, even if it's not, I get it, there's going to be some changes, and there's going to some pitfalls or things that can happen in between, but being able to at least get a pretty general budget of what you think that is going to take for this property. Then using those numbers, or using that budget, and being able to get a guesstimate or an educated opinion of what do you think that property will be worth or be valued at when it's complete. That's a term we use in the industry called ARV, or after repair value, right? Because that's your exit. That's the key to making money, is what is that after repair value. I usually like to recommend that when you're all in, meaning purchase price plus carrying costs plus your rehab, and then when you go to sell, that you want to be making anywhere between 25 to 30% profit from that number. As a lender, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I underwrite to making sure that you have a profit. If those profits are too slim, I know that as a lender, things can go sideways, or things can expenses can change. It takes longer to sell a property. Your holding costs are longer, and that 25, 30% could be eaten up pretty quickly. So I just want to make sure there's enough margin. Sometimes people are just looking at a dollar amount, and they're thinking, oh, I'm making 10 grand, I'm making 25, I'm making 30 grand profit. But it's really only 2, 3%, 4%, 5%, whatever it may be, that those numbers can get off, right? So it's just important to be able to build yourself enough margin in there to be able to be profitable, right? So, identified the property, you've put together a budget, you ran your numbers, you know your ARV is there, you know you're going to make a profit on this. Um, Throughout that process, you should be working with a lender. As ourselves at JSS, we help pretty much every step of that way. So we can help you identify the properties through our real estate team. We can help you put together the math, meaning are you going to make a profit once you've identified your budget? But working with a lender, getting approved for that loan. If your offer gets accepted at that point, as a lender, we'll write the pre-approval letters. We'll write, sometimes we do a little bit different. We do what's called the proof of funds letter, because when you're submitting an offer to the seller, sometimes you can get a better deal by waiving contingencies or going into a quicker close, or just showing that we are ready to wire funds to closing, as opposed to you still applying for a loan. So it's a little bit different than a conventional product in that aspect, right? So then once we do that, we do have to appraise the property. When we appraise the property, we're looking at two separate values on that appraisal. We're looking at your as-is value, meaning what are you buying for? What's the property worth as it currently sits? And then we provide your budget and your scope of work of what you're going to do to the property to the appraiser, so that they can give us that ARV, that magical ARV, where we know what your profits are going to be. Once we have that, all the numbers make sense, get your loan approved, we go into closing. The approval process is not very heavy. We do check credit. We're looking at your ability to have the money for down payment. Doesn't necessarily have to be seasoned. We can take ownership in an LLC, which we highly recommend. We prefer it, to be honest, is to doing it into an LLC. And we'll have another episode, another topic on just talking about corporate structure LLCs and why it's important, how to structure it, how to set one up, how to utilize the abilities that the government and the tax code gives us to be able to save some money on those aspects of it, right? But yeah, it's ability to make the down payment. We do check credit. We're looking for someone in the mid 600s, nothing spectacular. We can even work with lower credit scores, but we usually like to keep it in mid 600s. And we're looking for experience, right? Ideally, we are an experienced lender, experience-based lender. We're looking for, does a project make sense? Are you going to make money? And have you done this before? And will you be able to execute on time, on budget, and be able to make a profit? If you haven't done one before, we may not extend leverage as high, meaning, we're going to ask for a little bit larger down payment, maybe 20, maybe 25%, just because there's a little bit more risks. We want to make sure that there's I'm mitigating risk for my investors and monies, or our money that we're lending out, right? So those are basically the things that we're looking for. And then we're looking at your exit. We're looking at your exit strategy. Do you know your numbers? Do you know how much that property will sell for? If you're going to rent it, do you have a takeout loan, meaning once you finish the construction and my loan is due in 12 to 18 months, whatever that term is, there's a balloon payment. And if I've lent you $500,000 at the end of those 6 months, at the end of the 12 months, whatever that term is, you owe me that $500,000. So either you can sell the property and have our money paid back, or you refinance into a long-term loan product. And there's lots of different loan products out there that you can get into for a rental product. Right now, one of the things that are most popular and people are using the most, it's a program called DSCR, debt service coverage ratio, meaning that loan is approved. You are approved on that loan based off of what the property will rent for, and will it cover your mortgage payment? And that's usually, there's variations of it, and different lenders do different things, but that's usually what we qualify to, and you're looking to get into that. So there's different products, but as a fix and flip, when you're in that transaction, I am looking for your exit. Or am I going to get paid back? How am I going to get paid back? In what timeline and what time frame? Do you have the experience to be able to pay me back? Right? Those are the key things. So we do that. Loan's approved. We close a loan. Once we close a loan, like I said, we're funding the purchase, whatever percentage we agree to, and we escrow, or we keep that your budget ready for your repairs. That happens on a draw system, right? And this is a misconception a lot of people have, that if your budget was 50,000, if I'm going to write you a check for 50,000 at closing, and then you're going to go and maneuver and do and spend it accordingly. It's not the way it works. It is based off of milestones. When you submit your budget to me and we approve it, we know how much you're going to spend on, landscaping. We know how much you're going to spend on roof. So as you are completing certain tasks or certain milestones, you submit the invoice. You say, hey, this job is complete. We did the roof. I ordered these materials. The appliances have been ordered. Whatever it is, we have an invoice. The reason for that, mainly, like I always tell people, is my job is to make sure that you are successful in your project. The only way for us to do that is to control those funds, to ensure that the work is being done, and we are going to get to that future value that we all feel, or we all agree to, that is going to be there, right? Because that's what's going to ensure that successful exit. So we go through you're taking the money in milestones. You Throughout that process, you are making payments. It is an interest only payment, so you're not paying down on the principal. It's just interest that you're paying on, and that interest is only paid on what you've drawn on, right? So if the budget was 50,000, we're not charging you interest on the full 50, only per monthly as how much you've used, right? And then how long you keep it, and then you're ideally going to go ahead and sell that property, right? So you've done that. You're uh, could range anywhere between 2 points to 4 points, right? That's based off of the loan amount, not the purchase price. So it's based off of how much we're going to lend you. So make sure that you have your down payment, you have your closing costs, you have enough to pay your points. Ideally, I usually like to see as well um, 6 months of interest reserves. So ideally, I want to see that you, in some sort of assets, you have 6 months worth of payments put aside. Right. That's one of the things that people don't anticipate when they're getting to one of these projects. Is they're thinking, I'm going to make money. I'm going to make 100,000. I'm going to make 30%. I'm going to do all the things that make this project successful. But yet then they don't think about the carrying costs. They don't think about for the next 6 months, 12 months, however long the project's going to take you, you're making payments. Not only are you making a mortgage payment, right, which is into us, which is an interest only, which is a little bit smaller. Um, you're also paying insurance on the property. Some of these policies are usually a little bit more expensive because it's a vacant home insurance policy. You have contractors there, you have people working, so you want to make sure that you're covered. You're still paying your property taxes on the property, and you're also paying utilities, right? You're going to have workers there. You have electricity, you have water, you have gas, you have all the things that you need to maintain that property for the life of the loan. So making sure you have at least 6 months of that, I think, is key, because I've seen many projects go sideways because people run out of money in the middle. Meaning we have the money to do the repairs, but they don't have the money to make the monthly payments. So it's also something to keep in mind. Um, One of the things that I will mention as well is different mistakes or different pitfalls that you can kind of come into. Probably the biggest pitfall that I see is underestimating your rehab costs, right? I think I mentioned before that a lot of times, first time flippers are coming in with a grandiose idea of what they feel materials cost or what they think they can get the work done. Or a lot of times, oh, I can do this myself. I'm handy. I can paint. I can do this. And you may be able to, right? And I think those are great opportunities to be able to condense your costs or be able to save some money. But it's also good to assume the worst, right? Estimate in your estimates, estimate for the worst. Estimate that you're going to pay market for your plumbing, you're going to pay market for your electrical, unless you can do that yourself or you're licensed or what have you. But yeah, I see it a lot where, oh, my cousin's a plumber and he's going to help me out. Oh, my cousin's an electrician, and people make assumptions that they're going to get great deals or great bargains on some of the materials, some of the costs, and then they end up not, right? So that's big. Not only that, a big factor that I always tell people too is remember that this property is not your home. This is not going to be where you live. So I know sometimes when we're fixing a property up for ourselves, we may say, oh, you know what, I want this. And we will pay the little bit extra to get the upgraded material or to get the upgraded finish or do this or do that. Don't take that as I'm saying to cheap out, but don't overspend, right? And that's one of the factors I see the most on the projects that go sideways is people that are paying too much or putting in finishes or materials or that they're not going to get their money back for, right? Remember, it's an investment, and what's the return on your investment? If you spend $1, what are you going to get back from it? And a lot of times people put in $1 and only get back 75 cents, right? Because you upgraded to that marble finish, or you did this, or you got those high-end appliances, again, you also have to keep in mind what level of property you're doing, right? If it's a couple $100,000 home, your finishes are different. If you're doing $1 million home, I get it, your finishes are different. And I'm not saying cheap out. I am saying do the right amount of work. Don't do something that just because it's, oh, I love this color, or if I lived here, this is what I would want. Remember, most end users or people that are going to end up buying the property off of you are still going to do their own touches to it. They're still going to paint. They're still going to change things around to fit their family and their needs, right? You just want to make it look really nice, make it look finished, presentable. You want to give that when somebody walks in on your open house or when it's listed on the MLS, you want it to look buttoned up. You want it to look finished, like there's no money that they have to spend when they're moving in. even though they will, right? It's proven fact, they always will. But you want to make sure that at least it checks the box and it looks nice and and you give that illusion, not the illusion, but you give them when they walk in that just that dream and they're fulfilling that dream, right? Most people are buying a flip property, are first time home buyers and they don't, if they're coming in with low down payment type loans like FHA or whatnot, a lot of times they don't have all this money to spend on upgrading the home. So they want it to look finished, right? So give that wow factor when they walk in. But you don't need all these extra, you know, crazy appliances or faucets or things that may not seem expensive, but they do eat into your profit. So that's one of the things I see the most is don't forget that the property's not for you. Communication with your contractors, right? Having clear contracts with them. What is it going to cost? The timeline, how they want to be paid. One of those conversations that I say always have ahead of time with your contractor is how do you expect to be paid, right? Because when you're working on the draw system, we're reimbursing you off of completed work, right? So a lot of contractors, you can hire them, you give a certain amount down. When they complete certain tasks, they invoice you. You have net 30, or you have 30 days to pay them, or you have 2 weeks to pay them, whatever you've negotiated with them. That's usually helpful because once they complete the job, they're floating the costs as a contractor, and that gives us time to pay them. Once you submit that invoice to us as a job completed, we usually can reimburse you in 3 or 4 days. So keeping that in mind when you're picking your contractor, that it's not somebody who's going to need all this money up front, especially if you don't have that to float yourself out of pocket. So communication with your contractors, timelines. Do I need permits? What do I need permits for? Realistic timeline on how long will that take? Do we need to outsource? Do we need to bring in architects, engineers? Just having that clear and concise plan, I think it's huge. Having a clear and concise exit strategy. What is this property going to sell for? Or if it's going to rent, what do I think it's going to rent for? Right? One or the other. But being able to know your numbers, that's, I don't know. I don't know how else to say it, but as a lender, when we're risking our money and our investors' money, we want to make sure our money's protected, right? We're not going to throw our money to somebody who we don't feel has a good grasp on their numbers, somebody who doesn't have a grasp on what they're doing and they're going to be able to execute, right? We want to build that long-term partnership with you guys where you're a successful project, you made money, we partner with you for the next one and the next one and the next one. And we have clients now that we work with who flip 2 to 3 properties a month, right? They're smaller stuff, but they're getting in and out and they have it down pat. Like they know what they're doing. Those are the people that we want to work with, right? People who keep us busy, but we know our money's secure. We know that if I connect you with one of my investors and they're going to write some checks for you, money's getting paid back, timely manner, and we're lessening the risk, right? That's pretty much the full roadmap, I'd say, of a fix and flip, how to use it, what to expect, potential pitfalls. Remember, I know a lot of people will call us sometimes and ask, and they're like, "Oh, it's expensive, and there's a lot of things." And I always say, yes, we're not cheap. It's not cheap money, but if you're utilizing it to a means to an end, if you're using that to accelerate your progress, if you're using that to be able to leverage and buy more and be able to lessen your personal exposure out of pocket, I think it's worth it, right? I mean, yes, interest rates on a fix and flip loan can go anywhere between 9 to 12% annual. And yeah, it's expensive, right? It's not your conventional loan product. But again, we're quick, we're agile, we're going to give you more money than the property is valued at right now. We're going to help you lessen your exposure out of pocket. We're going to be able to lend to a corporation or an LLC, which traditional lending will not. And we're going to be able to accelerate and be able to light a fire and be able to help you progress and be able to move forward. Not only that, you have us as a team, you have us as experience. And because I see these day in and day out, I see different projects. I can tell you, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried these, going this place for materials? Have you tried going to these warehouse stores? whatever it is, we can be able to use that as experience to help you out because again, we have the experience. We